In this video, I'm going to go over the horizontal and vertical constraints in Autodesk Inventor. So the horizontal and vertical constraints are geometric constraints we can use with our 2D sketches to make our lines either horizontal or vertical, but it actually is another use in addition to that. The horizontal and vertical constraints can be used to line up points on our geometry, which is a very handy tool for us. So let's start with the most basic use for these two geometric constraints by just making a bunch of lines, which we see here, either horizontal or vertical. So horizontal, because I'm on the front face of my view cube, is running left to right across the screen and is parallel to our x-axis here. So the horizontal constraint, you can see my mouse dancing on it, is right here. I'm going to left click on it to activate it and then go ahead and select the line that I want to go horizontal. You'll notice it takes that line and it flips it, so it's now running parallel to our x-axis, and it gets that little symbol that pops up there. That's the horizontal constraint symbol. Let's do that one more time. So with this line down here, now one more thing before I click on it, you'll notice when I hover my mouse over top of this line, it gives us a dotted line that runs across the screen left to right here. So what it's doing is it's showing me if I click on this line, this is the direction it's going to be running. It's going to be running along this dotted line, this little preview that's popping up. So I'm going to go ahead and left click on it. And again, sure enough, it runs along that dotted line here, left to right. So that's the horizontal constraint. Now let's take a look at the vertical constraint. So the vertical constraint is located right beside the horizontal constraint up here in the panel. And I'm going to left click on it to activate it. Now it's the same thing. When I click on this first line here, it flips it so it's now running vertically. So it's running from top to bottom. And we get that little vertical constraint symbol popping up beside it. Now if I hover over the second line here, again, I'm going to show you that dotted line that pops up. And that dotted line just gives us a preview of which direction that line is going to be running when I click on it. Now this is important because on the front view, the horizontal and vertical constraints actually run, like the horizontal constraint runs along the x-axis and the vertical constraint runs along the y-axis. But if I was to flip this to my right side view, and I was working on a side of my 3D feature on the right side, my horizontal and vertical constraints are actually the opposite. The horizontal one runs vertically and vice versa. So you want to always take a look at that dotted line and see which direction it's running so that you're putting the correct constraint on. So I'm going to click on that line to make it vertical. Now let's do this with an actual shape. So here I have a parallelogram that has no horizontal or vertical sides to it whatsoever. So I'm going to activate my horizontal constraint and click on the top and bottom line to make those two horizontal. Now I'm going to do the same thing by activating my vertical constraint, and I'm going to click on the left and then the right sides of this, and now we have ourselves a rectangle with 90-degree corners. And we can always check those using the dimension button here. We can see it's 90 degrees. So that's the use of the horizontal and vertical constraint in actually straightening out your line segments, whether they're in a shape like with this rectangle or whether they're loose line segments like our first examples down here, to make them either horizontal or vertical. Now, this is the cool part. We can use these constraints to actually line up points on our geometry. So it's not always about just making a line either horizontal or vertical. So for example here, you can see the little yellow dot on my screen. This is the center point of my sketch. Sometimes I call it the origin point. But I want these circles and this line here to all be in line vertically with this origin point. So what I can do is I can click on my vertical constraint. I can select that yellow dot, that center point, and then I can select the center point on this circle, and you can see that dotted line pops up again. So it's going to line them up along that dotted line. So if I left click on the center point of that circle, it actually moves it so that it's in line with that center point. Now, if I was to, I just turned off that constraint by hitting escape on my keyboard. Now, if I grab the center point of that circle, look at my mouse move left to right. That circle does not move left to right anymore because I've constrained it vertically in line here. Now I can still move it up and down because there's nothing stopping it from moving up and down. There's no dimensions or constraints on it, but it doesn't move left to right. So that's the beauty of using the constraints to line things up. Let's do that again. So this time I'm going to use the horizontal constraint. And I'm going to line up the center point of my second circle with the center point of my first circle. And notice what happened there. It moved my circles so that now they're in line here. And notice what happens if I grab my first circle here. So I'm grabbing the center point and moving it up and down. It's still locked in place vertically, so it has to stay in line with the center point of my sketch. But notice it's dragging the other circle around with it because this other circle has to stay in line with it left to right. Now we can do that not only with circles, we can use lines as well. So I'm going to place a vertical constraint on the bottom point on this line right here. So make sure you grab the point on the line, not the line itself. And then I'm going to grab the center point of my first circle. And it's moved that line. It's right here if I select it. It's moved that line so that it's also in line vertically with the center point and with my first circle here. If I go left to right, it's not going left to right. So the horizontal and vertical constraints are handy little constraints in Inventor, not only for making our line segments horizontal or vertical, but also for lining up points of our sketches.